Thank you very much. I think anyone that tries to tackle the history of the San Simon River could come up with 30, 40 different slides, different topics on this river. This river's a little bit like the wind. You may not see it, but you know it's there. So I'll get right to it because I have a lot of slides. I'm going to hopefully let the pictures do the talking. The San Simon River, or Rio San Domingo, Rio de Saus, or San Simon Creek, is about 90 miles in length. Its headwater tributaries are to the south, bordering the San Bernardino Valley down here. Here we are at Rodeo, and I live over here. Horseshoe Canyon Creek enters what will become the river. Maybe at Rodeo, you can't see it, but north of Rodeo, you begin to see a stream. And as our last presenter mentioned, the Chiricahua Mountains and the Peloncillo Mountains, the waters off of those ranges enter into what will become the San Simon River above ground as well, maybe more importantly at the headwaters below ground. And as the water approaches the Gila River, we have Mount Graham, or the Peñoleños, and the Peloncillos, a very long range to the east that supply water for the San Simon River. Here we have a couple of maps from 2 centuries ago. One that calls it the Rio Saint Domingo, which is a little bit of Spanglish because this map has Saint instead of San Domingo. I tried to find out if this refers to Holy Sunday or to Saint Dominic. I couldn't find any answers. And I assume there's probably documents in Chihuahua or Sonora that may have the answers to that sort of question. But we do know that the Spanish word saus means willow, and ciénaga, marsh. So by the mid-1800s, typically this river was called the Rio Saus in Spanish, but somewhere along the line that changed to San Simon. But still, in the 1880s, we have the River of the Willows, or of the Willow. And here we have two more, well, one's a road map, 20th century. The other, I believe, might be late 1800s, but we have 2 examples of San Simon Creek. I don't know if you all can see back there. Where do we have? There's San Simon Creek, abbreviated, and here we have the same thing. And I could see calling it San Simon Creek. Maybe that's a better term, but I like San Simon River. Yes, and here it's actually running. And we have Kim Vocariu to thank for providing me with this photograph. So if you're traveling on Highway 80, you're north of Rodeo, and you're about to make that turn to go up to Granite Gap. There is a turn in the road. If you look to your left, this is the San Simon run. It was running. And I'm curious, can anybody raise their hand if they saw the river running this morning with all of our rain? No, or we're not sure. No, it wasn't. Okay. I also wanted to mention that here we have Portal, and Cave Creek meanders. Follow the laser. It's about right here. I checked my odometer. I have it wrong about a mile or more. It's roughly 2 miles from south of this spot, where this is the Cheneth Ranch, which has been there since the 1880s. And again, you're starting to climb up towards Granite Gap on Highway 80 if you're headed north. History is a big subject, and I'm going to start with the mammals that were once here. We have mastodons and mammoths. We had several varieties of species of horses. These were not what was or is the Eurasian, I should say, horse, but close relatives. We had camels, sloths. I would also mention we had Mexican grizzly bears as well as black bears. The Mexican grizzly was extirpated in the Peloncillo mountain range as late as 1930. So we had grizzlies into the modern era, as well as Merriam's elk. I believe they were still here when the first American pioneers came into the region. And we also had beaver, and that will show up at the end of my talk where a cousin to the beaver shows up in the San Simon Cienega. Who lived along the San Simon River at the dawn of the historic period? So history obviously predates the historic period when the Spanish began recording in written form what was going on in the New World. But I'm going to stick to post or after the prehistoric period. We do have history for that as well. But around 1500, we would have had 3 language-speaking groups of people that may have lived in the region. And I would assume an anthropologist or paleontologist might know more about this than I do. But we have members of a very large language family, the Uto-Aztecan language family, which would include the modern Sabipri-A'atham, the Acamil-A'atham, which are often called Pima Indians, and the Opata, which all part of that language group. The Opata are more Sonoran than in this region, but for a long, long time, we thought the Chiricahua Mountains, Chiricahua being Turkey Mountains, came from the Opata. Recent study may show that it was the Sabipri-A'atham, their cousins, who named the mountain range. Then we have nomadic hunter-gatherers, more from the south and the east toward the El Paso region, the Rio Grande. And next, and they would have been nomadic, so they didn't really set up villages in the area. And we're not even sure that some of those extinct groups spoke Uto-Aztecan, but there are a few words that would make us think so. The second group that came in right about maybe before the historic period would be the Athabascans from Canada as they moved south. By the time they reached this area, they had divided into Apache and Navajo. And finally, Pueblo peoples from the north and the east would have also possibly made it into the region. And here's just a quick map of some of those language groups. All these people in here, Uto-Aztecan, we have the northerners coming into the region, and here's the Pueblo peoples. So I am biased in my study of the San Simon River history. I live in the upper San Simon River region, and so I'm not an expert on the lower San Simon River region, but it's fascinating because their history is very well documented and complex. But from the prehistoric period to the 1870s, the Pima or the Acamil-A'atham, the river people, lived near the confluence of the San Simon and Gila rivers. Pima is derived from Spanish for I don't know. You know, we'd be asked by Spaniards, you know, where did we find all the gold? Nah, I don't know. Or, you know, give the Spaniards the wrong answer. They were pushed out by the settlers who diverted the Gila River and San Simon River water, which the Acamil were great farmers at the time. Okay, the upper San Simon River region where we are at right now, obviously everybody knows, was controlled by the Chiricahua Apaches from late prehistory or early history, we could say too. It's how you argue it, to 1886. They were already known as Chiricahua by the late 1700s. And here is a map of that lower San Simon River region. And I had never driven the length of the river, and of course you can't, but you can intersect it in a few places if you just drive north of Bowie along Heckle Road. And I probably got as far as about right in here, and there was a road closed sign. I did this about 3 weeks ago, and I had to divert over to Highway 191 on Tankay Road. But this area is, and forgive me for sounding sort of prejudiced, but it was like a wasteland. There's no homes there. There's a few windmills. It's very sandy, a whitish sand. There's scrub. But I don't know any of the history of this region. I don't know the ranchers that had it. But once you get north of where I diverted over to 191, that's irrigated country, and a person would be in the homeland of the Akamil A'atham. And Solomon is an old settlement that at one time was called Pueblo Viejo, or Old Town. That was in the 1870s. Its name changed to Solomon, and that's in Graham County, obviously. Charcoal production and farming were the town's first industries. And so on my trip, I drove up. This is the Solomon Cemetery, and it's up on a hill, just like these. I would assume these are alluvial dumps from the Gila River and San Simon rivers. A very interesting cemetery. Most of the folks buried there are of Hispanic heritage. In fact, a famous Apache guide for the U.S. military, he wasn't Apache, but he was Opata by the name of Marihildo Grijalva. He and his wife are buried there. And if I understand Facebook correctly, he still has descendants. But if you are an Apache historian of that period of the late 1800s, Marihildo shows up quite often as helping the U.S. track down the Apaches. He was kidnapped in Mexico from his Opata family, and he even married another kidnapping victim, and he's buried here. A very interesting cemetery that's a little scary driving your car around it. You might slide off this hill. This line of shrubs and trees is the San Simon River, and it's going to empty into the Gila about right here. In the distance is Safford. This is Solomon's right around in here, and that lush greenery is cotton fields. And here we have Mount Graham. The Spanish period. They were here, but they were just here on expeditions to try to stop Apache depredations, as well as in the early period, the Apaches were aligned with other groups. Some of the Uto-Aztecan people, they would ally together to fight the Spaniards. And here are just two examples. Both from, 1695, 100 years before the next one is soldiers who reached Ciénaga de Saus in 1695. They replenished their water. 126 men held council with the Indians, this alliance of Apaches and non-Apaches, at Paradise in the Chiricahua Mountains. 100 years later, so our keynote speaker today, I thought this was interesting. The records for temperatures in the region start in 1795, and that was the year that Capitan Zuniga referred to the Ciénaga as La Ciénaga Salada, or the salty marsh, which is interesting. I haven't really heard that those waters are saline or alkali, but that's what he thought at the time. Of course, Mexico fought a war for independence and they won in 1821. They held this region for, well, they didn't hold it, I shouldn't say that, but on paper, on maps, this was Mexican territory. They sent soldiers from Sonora and Chihuahua a few times into the region, but they never were able to subjugate the Apaches. This was Apache territory in the time that Mexico owned this on paper. The first Norte Americanos were fur trappers. They came into the region to trap beaver as well as other mammals to sell the pelts, the furs, back east. I think I won't read the rest of it. You can see it, hopefully. Yeah, Kit Carson's brother, Moses Carson, was on that expedition, as well as Davy Jackson's slave. And they came to this region on their way west and then most likely went through it again on their way back to Santa Fe. In 1848, we have the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo. The San Simon River was still the territory of Mexico, but many U.S. settlers traversed the area on their way to California. And there was a big event in 1849 in the West, the discovery of gold in California, which plus California entering the Union, obviously, brought settlers through this southern route, which was Mexican territory. And a number of these groups camped along the San Simon Ciénaga. I wanted to show you these sketches because I just think they're great. This is Granite Peak in the area of what we call Granite Gap. So Highway 80 would be going through this area here. I love the, where did I see them? Cattails. I don't see willow trees, but that could just be, that's maybe what this, no, that's probably maybe grama grass. So this is the Bartlett, the John Russell Bartlett survey expedition to survey the southern boundary with the United States. Below this was still Mexico, but Bartlett had some things wrong, and one of his surveyors by the name of Henry Belcher Gray is going to dispute Bartlett's decisions, but then that all gets taken care of with another treaty, the Gadsden Purchase. This is a great one as well, because here we're looking at the expedition looking into Cave Creek Canyon. We're probably, sitting about right here, somewhere in this area, a few miles from this spot. Maybe those are the willow trees right there. A wonderful sketch. Those sketches then become engravings. This is the rendition of the Grand Canyon of the Chiricahuas, looking into what will be one day Portal. Well, actually, I guess Portal's over here. We're looking into the canyon. I think I first saw this image from Mike Anderson a few years back, and I just fell in love with it. I'm just guessing that this was drawn from the Peloncillo Mountains at Antelope Pass between Animas and Rodeo. Eventually, there would be somewhere down in here, the railroad siding called Pratt. But it was not named for Pratt that was on the Bartlett expedition, but a mining entrepreneur later. So the USA purchased this area during the Treaty of Mesilla, June 8th, 1854. The map shows you are right here, roughly. And now this is American territory to the present day. Map of New Mexico Territory, 1857. At the time, Arizona, I believe, would have been the southern section, and this was the northern section. That's how the remember, if you recall, the Confederate States of America held little bits and pieces of this territory for a few months, I think it was. Someone can correct me if I'm wrong. But when the Union regained this territory in the Civil War, they decided, all right, we need to do something about this north-south bisect of the territory, so they chopped it up the other way, with the west being Arizona, the east being New Mexico. And at the time, Mesilla, south of Las Cruces, was the capital of the territory. All right, this really confused me. So if any of you want to do research on the San Simon River, there is this anomaly that was very strange when I researched it. It had me all excited that there was a mission along the San Simon River in the 1700s, but it was completely botched by quite a few cartographers during the 1800s. Rio Suanca actually refers to the mission of Santa Maria de Suanca in Sonora, south of Nogales, along the Santa Cruz River, I believe. But this isn't the only map and reference to our area having this mission or the river named for it. And all I can figure, there was a confusion with the word souse and Suanca. Because here you have it again. Same thing. Wrong river. Andrew Belcher Gray was the surveyor who disputed what Bartlett came up with in his survey. Gray mapped this area that would by 1901 would become the El Paso and Southwestern Railroad. And if you step out of this building and look to the Peloncillo Mountains, you'll see Mount Gray. Mount Gray is the tallest peak in the Peloncillo Mountains, and it is named for Mr. Andrew Belcher Gray. All right, so next part of my history lesson here is the two stagecoach lines that came through the area, the San Antonio and San Diego Mail Company, known as the Jackass Mail because they used mules to get through some of those tight spots. And we also have the Overland Mail Company that most of us here called Butterfield. And there is some thought that, okay, so the Butterfield went through this area, through Doubtful Canyon, north of what is now I-10. However, there's a few references to a southern route that might have went right through the Cienega. And I'll get more into the Cienega in a bit. All right. By May of 1861, there was an abandoned or old San Simon station. A few accounts mention a southern route that avoided Doubtful Canyon when the Apaches were in the area, or when the water supply in Doubtful Canyon was gone. And here we have, already published in 1863, mileage information to reach the San Simon station. The San Simon station for the stagecoaches is moved to what is almost now modern San Simon, which sort of lines up with the railroad that goes through San Simon. And here's a drawing from 1858. I could picture this being the stagecoach trying to get through the San Simon Cienega. We have Cochise still on the, he's still killing American settlers in 1871, and his ally, fellow Apache Who, in fact, we have a canyon in the Chiricahuas named Who's Canyon. His warriors attack two men at Hugh O'Neill's ranch along the San Simon Cienega in 1871. It's interesting, Hugh O'Neill, the prior January of 1871, was attacked with fellow miners, prospectors in the Chiricahua Mountains, and I can find no more reference to Hugh O'Neill after that. He was wounded in that attack, and I wonder if he may have died from those wounds, and that's why these two hay harvesters harvesting the grama grass or the saccatone, maybe saccatone grass as well, along the Cienega to sell that hay, that grass to Fort Bowie for their horses. And they were attacked with Richard Barnes being killed. Gilbert makes it back to Fort Bowie to tell the military, and that incident is 3 days before the Battle of Horseshoe Canyon, Chiricahua Mountains, where there were fatalities on both sides in that engagement. Now here we have the Chiricahua Reservation, which lasted from 1872 to 1876, October of 1876, I should say. Cochise makes peace, and we actually had the agency headquarters on the San Simon Cienega for a few months in that year. I don't think anyone knows the exact spot where that was located. We can read the federal written record during that time period, and there were no wooden buildings. I'm not sure any adobes, but Tom Jeffords mentions canvas quarters, so there may never have been foundations in that area. But there were a number of young Apache people that died at the Cienega during this time, probably from malaria, which forced the U.S. government to move their headquarters to what is Apache Pass or near Fort Bowie after this. Oh, I put a note in there of the 2,736,000 acres on the reservation, only about 2,000 were farmable, the vast majority being the malaria-infested marsh along the San Simon River. Now, what struck me about that was, why did not the federal government try to make ranchers out of the Apaches rather than farmers? They would have been great cattlemen, I think, or cattle people. And I just, it's hard to believe that the San Simon River was the only arable farming land on the entire reservation. And we could have had them harvesting the grass, feeding cattle on the area, but no, we tried to make them farmers, and it didn't work out. I wanted to throw a little levity into the presentation. This is not historically accurate right here, and I doubt the Murillo and Rodriguez circus had an elephant, but it begs the question, what animals were they watering along the San Simon Cienega, and were they trespassing on the reservation? The reservation still existed in June of 1876. And if that's hard to read, I'll read it for you. By letter from Apache Pass, which is very close to Fort Bowie. Oh, 1 minute. Okay. Yeah, I won't read that. But you get the idea. There was a circus attacked on the Cienega, and a couple of acrobats were injured, which could ruin a career, shot in the leg, so forth. Wow, and we have the cowboy element, which is connected to Cloverdale in southern New Mexico, Galeyville in the Chiricahua Mountains, and of course, obviously, Tombstone. Another one of these cowboys who was a Union veteran, so I'm not sure how closely he was interacting with the Clantons, because the Clantons would have been, I think, Southern sympathizers, and Mr. Hughes was from Ireland and fought for the Union in New Mexico. Interestingly enough, his grandson, if you ever want to read a great story, the kidnapping of June Robles from 1934 in Tucson, fascinating story, and FBI implicated Nicholas Hughes' grandson, Mr. Robeson, in that. All right, we have the sheriff's election of 1880, the ballot stuffing incident along the San Simon Cienega, where 103 votes were cast for the Democrat Party candidate, Mr. Scheibel. The ringleaders of that were the cowboys. They were a dastardly bunch, stealing cattle in in Old Mexico, as well as stealing livestock from the U.S. cavalry and then selling them to American interests. And we have the Cheneths, and that's all I got. Thank you.